Hi guys, welcome to another recipe video for lockdown. And today we're going to be looking at one of my favourite recipes, really simple recipe to cook as well. And it's pork with sage and cider. Okay, so I've got a nice bottle of cider. Things you're going to need is one pork chop per person, an onion, that's quite a large one, 2 garlic cloves, and as you see these are quite big garlic cloves. If you've got the small garlic cloves you probably want to go to like 4. Some sage, fresh sage is best. You can use dried sage. I've got a sage bush growing in my garden, so it's nice and handy. And then an optional ingredient for a little bit of extra is a couple of apples. Now, starting off with the pork, I have already done a little bit of this, and in the pan, background here, you can also get in a saute pan with a lid, or a frying pan with a lid. In there I've already got some of the pork fat that's rendered down, so I can fry in it instead of using olive oil. But the first step is you will notice that these pork chops, these have come from a farm, they've got the skin on the outside. Okay, and you can tell it's a skin because it looks a little bit like skin. You're going to want to remove that for cooking. Now you'll notice if we zoom in on the pork chop, you have a line just underneath the skin, and if you get your pair of scissors and cut along that line, I've already done this one, the skin will come off, and then you can either use that for making pork scratchings or crackling by sticking it in the oven. If you're going to do that, you're going to want to score through the skin and then rub some salt and maybe some spices in there and stick it in the oven. The other thing you can do, if you don't want to do that step and you want to leave all the fat on and the skin on, is with a pair of scissors or with a sharp knife. These scissors aren't sharp enough. You can cut little indents into the skin there, and that stops it curling up. However, I'm going to go ahead, and on this one I'm also going to cut off the skin and the fat because I am trying to eat a bit healthily at the moment. It's going to take some of the flavour away, but it's going to be better for you. So there we go. As you can see, it cuts off quite easily. You don't have to be too precious about it. That's that prepped. Now, before we prep the veg, if you touch the pork, obviously you're going to need to wash your hands, and then what we're going to do is we're going to chop the onion, we're going to chop the garlic up, and we'll show you that in a second. Start again. So, when you've chopped the onion and the garlic, so you notice I've just sliced the onion and I've kind of diced the garlic. Don't be worried about the size of the garlic, it doesn't really matter if it's big chunks or smaller chunks. It doesn't have to be the same size, just chop it roughly. With the onion, only the onion, into the pan that's already got some oil in. It's on a low-medium heat, and break it up. And we're going to let that sweat down a little bit. While that's going, we can turn our attention to the apples. You can peel them if you want. I'm going to leave the skins on because there's a lot of goodness in there. Now to core them, you can use an apple corer, but that's a pointless bit of kitchen equipment. Much quicker way of coring them. Doesn't waste as much apple either. Chop the apple in half. Sharp knife, chop the apple in half. Chop it then into a quarter, like that. Then carefully, when it's on its side, angle the knife about 45 degrees and just chop the bit of the core out. Easy. Do that on all the other quarters. Don't need to worry about buying a kitchen gadget that you're only going to use once. Okay, when you chop the apple into quarters, the next step is we're going to turn them into chunks as well. So with each of your quarter, if you've got a small apple like this, chop it in half lengthways, and then 1, 2 chops into roughly even sections. Doesn't have to be exactly even. 1, 2. When that's done, you can take your fresh sage and just take some of the leaves off. You're going to need a good handful of leaves. You won't need the stalks. You can just set those to one side. If you're using dried sage, use about a tablespoon or two. Start off with a tablespoon, and then when it's cooking you can taste it and always add a little bit more. So always err on the side of caution, because you can always add more of these ingredients, you can never take them out. So that's probably enough sage there. I'm not in fact going to chop that up, although you could if you wanted to. You could tear it if you wanted as well, so that's just what I'm going to do. I'm just going to tear it in half roughly, just to break them up a little bit, help some of that flavour come out. And that's all I'm going to do. The rest of this sage I can put in a box, a little Tupperware or in a bag, and stick it in the fridge where it will keep good for a little while. Okay, so we're going to need these onions to soften down and shrink in volume a little bit, and when that's happened we will come back to it. So when the onions nicely softened and then take up less volume, it's time to add the meat in. So turn the heat up. If you've got gas, it's pretty quick. If you've got an electric stove, if you've got one of the flat hot plates at the top, it'll take a little bit longer to heat up. But then add the pork chops in and kind of squidge them so you get maximum space. And what you can do there as well is just spoon the onion mixture over the top of the pork chops, just so it doesn't burn. Now you're going to cook it for a few minutes on each side. What we're not doing here is we're not cooking the pork all the way through. We're just trying to brown the meat on the outside and give it some nice colour. The actual cooking of the meat is going to come when we add the cider, or indeed the stock or apple juice. Now a little note here for our American viewers: cider is fermented apple juice, it's alcoholic. What you call cider, a lot of the time, I believe anyway, is apple juice. There is a difference. Okay, so cider is alcoholic. I'm using a nice farmhouse scrumpy from an orchard called Gwynty Drake, who make some excellent cider. They are Welsh. You could use French cider. You can use some of the stuff that you can get from the supermarkets as well. Don't use Strongbow. If it comes out of a can, it's probably not going to be suitable for this. It's going to be too sugary and too artificial. Don't use Bulmers or Magners or a Cordelig or anything like that. Again, it's going to be too artificial. It's going to be too sugary. You could also use, I guess, a Perry. A Perry is often called a pear cider. Okay, so Perry is cider made with pears. It's fermented pear juice. You could also use that, but I recommend going for something like a cloudy scrumpy. If you do get a cloudy scrumpy, make sure you gently tip the bottle up and down a few times to mix it all in. Remember to turn the pork chops. You can do that a couple of times. You want to make sure they're nice and brown on both sides, and we'll come back to that and show you that when it's finished. When the meat's almost brown, or coming close to being brown, it's now time to add the garlic and the apples as well. The reason why we don't add the garlic before is otherwise when it's chopped up like this it will burn, and if the garlic burns it gets quite a bitter flavour. So we can add in the garlic now and the apples, and we'll give that all a good stir so it's going to get in contact with the fat and it's going to fry a little bit. Ah, it smells great with the addition of the garlic. Ah, lovely. Flip the pork chops again. And I'm going to give that a couple of minutes of frying at a medium-high heat. And then I'm going to get the cider in there. So before I get the cider in there, open it. Genuine, I think, 1950s, 1960s bottle opener, antique. I'm going to give it a little taste out of the mug just to make sure it's good. I'm not sure, I need to try more. I've got another bottle of this, give me a minute, I'll need some more testing. So after a couple of minutes of letting those things fry, you're going to get your cider, you're going to pour in enough cider to mostly cover the meat. Again, if you don't want to use cider, you can use apple juice. You can also use chicken stock or pork stock or even vegetable stock, and that will work just as well. So at this point we can add in our sage. You can either use the fresh sage like I'm using here, or you can use dried sage. Both work very well. Just make sure you give that a little bit of a stir into the water, the liquid. Add in some freshly ground pepper and some salt. Give it a good stir. Pop the lid on and reduce the heat to fairly low. And then we're going to simmer it for about 20 minutes, basically until the pork's cooked through. You could do it for half an hour, you could even do it for about 40 minutes. You want to make sure though, if you cook it for too long, the pork might get a little dry, a little tough. So basically you're cooking it for how long the pork needs to be cooked for. And that's going to depend on the thickness of your pork chops. These ones are quite thick, so it might take more like half an hour rather than 20 minutes, but after 20 minutes I'm going to check to see how they've done, and I'll show you that process when I get there. Anyway, I'm going to enjoy the rest of this cider, what limited amount I have left, and I'll see you soon. So, it's been going about 20 minutes, so let's check how it's done. Just take a little small knife and basically stab it in and cut it into the meat, somewhere near the bone, in the middle. And if it looks on the inside, you can like twist the knife a little bit. And if it looks like the juices and the meat is clear, then it's done. Okay, this is done. What you can do then, if you want, is this is like an optional extra step, is you can take the meat out and rest it on some pre-warmed plates. And then heat the sauce up rather rapidly with some stirring, after tasting it for seasoning, to thicken it up a little bit. Then, when it's ready to serve, you can get a bed of rice, or something similar to that. Mashed potato also works. Bed of rice, and on each plate, I'll try and get this set up so you can see it in the camera. One of the pork chops on each plate, on top of a bed of rice, which I've not got here because again I'm trying to eat healthily, trying to reduce my calorie intake. And then once you put the pork chops on top, you can then get yourself a serving spoon. And sadly I don't quite have the right kind of serving spoon, so I'm just going to use a tablespoon and carefully spoon some of the sauce and some of the apple and onion mixture over the top of all of that, and that'll look really good and it'll taste even better. Alright, I'm going to go and enjoy this along with another glass of cider, and I hope you like the video. If you've got any comments, got any suggestions about how you do it differently, or give it a try and you really liked it, let me know. I hope to see you soon. Right, take care guys, bye bye.